"Ma'am, this range is hot. We need you to clear the firing line." The voice, belonging to a young lieutenant whose crisp new cover did little to hide his youth, was laced with an almost bored condescension. He gestured vaguely toward the spectators' area, a dusty patch of ground 100 yards behind them. Chief Petty Officer Emily Johnson didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed downrange, where the heat rising from the California desert floor made the distant steel targets dance and shimmer. The 1,000-yard target, a formidable challenge on a calm day, was a mirage-shrouded ghost in this wind. "I'm the instructor assigned to your team today, Lieutenant," she said, her voice even and calm, carrying easily over the gusting wind. She didn't turn to look at him, keeping her attention on the problem at hand. The inconsistent wind holds his snipers were applying. The Lieutenant Miller stepped closer, planting himself in her peripheral vision. "I think there's been a mistake. We were expecting Chief Gunner's Mate Williams. Our training request was for a Naval Special Warfare qualified instructor." He emphasized the last 4 words as if they were a holy scripture she was unworthy of reading. "Chief Williams is on emergency leave," Emily replied, finally turning to face him. She held up the tablet with the day's training schedule. Her name, CPOE. Johnson, was clearly listed next to his SEAL team's designation. "I'm his replacement. Now, if you'll excuse me, your shooter is about to send another $200 round into the dirt." Miller's jaw tightened. He glanced at his men. A fire team of 4 snipers huddled around their spotting scopes and rifles, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. This was a test. It always was. "With all due respect, Chief," Miller said, dropping the ma'am for the more rank-appropriate but somehow more dismissive title, "we're not running basic marksmanship drills here. This is advanced high-angle variable wind instruction. Our gear, our ballistics, our mission parameters. It's a different world. We need someone who understands that." He was talking about the ecosystem of gear spread out on the mats. The multi-$1,000 rifles, the Schmidt and Bender scopes that cost more than a used car, the Kestrel wind meters and sophisticated ballistic computers that crunched data in microseconds. It was an impressive display of technology meant to solve the ancient problem of putting a small piece of metal exactly where you wanted it over a vast distance. And his team was failing. They had been failing for the last hour, their shots consistently drifting left, then high, then nowhere close. The frustration was a palpable thing, radiating off them like the desert heat. "I see the problem," Emily said, ignoring his implication. She gestured toward the shooter who had just missed. "Your man is reading the wind at his position, and he's reading the mirage downrange, but he's not accounting for the draw. See that ravine at 600 yards? The terrain is funneling the wind, accelerating it. You're getting a push you can't see." Miller scoffed, a small, sharp sound. "We know how to read wind, Chief. Your results suggest otherwise," she stated, not as an insult but as a simple diagnosis. "You're dialing for a 10-mile-per-hour wind, but you're experiencing a 15-mile-per-hour gust halfway to the target. It's a classic topographical error." One of the other SEALs, a brawny man with a thick beard, chuckled. "Topographical error. Sounds like something from a textbook." Emily met his gaze. "That's where lessons are written down so you don't have to learn them with blood. You're wasting ammo and training time. Let me help you fix it." Miller stepped directly in front of her, crossing his arms. He was taller than her by a good 6 inches, a wall of muscle and gear. "Look, Chief, I'm sure you're a fine instructor at the main base. Great for teaching recruits how to qualify. But my men are the finest marksmen in the United States Navy. We don't need help from someone who hasn't been where we've been." The unspoken word hung in the air. "Woman." Emily's posture didn't change. She remained relaxed, centered. Her own gear was far less flashy. She wore standard Navy-issue working uniform, the blouse faded from the sun. On a simple leather belt she carried a worn data book, its cover soft and creased from years of use. It looked ancient next to their sleek digital tools. "Lieutenant," she said, her voice dropping a register, losing its patient instructional tone and gaining a hard edge of command. "Your men are missing the target. My job is to fix that. Your job is to let me. So I'm going to ask you to step aside so I can speak to your shooter." Miller's eyes narrowed. This was the moment of decision, the point where he could de-escalate or double down. The small audience of his team and a few range safety officers observing from a nearby tower made his choice for him. He couldn't be seen backing down. "No," he said flatly. "I'm not going to let you interfere with my team's training. We'll figure it out ourselves. I'm responsible for this team, and I am telling you that your services are not required. We'll wait for Chief Williams to return." "That's a week away," Emily countered. "Are you really going to waste an entire week of range time because you don't like my credentials?" "I haven't seen any credentials," he shot back, his voice rising. All I see is a name on a schedule. For all I know, you're a supply chief who got lost on her way to the warehouse." The insult was childish, designed to humiliate. A few of his men snickered. Emily's expression remained a placid mask, but inside, a familiar weariness settled in. She had fought this battle in armories, on ship decks, in ready rooms, and now on a sniper range. It was always the same. The assumption that she was out of place, that her presence had to be a mistake. She reached into her pocket and produced her military ID, holding it out for him. Chief Petty Officer Emily Johnson, Small Arms Marksmanship Instructor, Master Training Specialist. Now are we done with the introductions? Miller barely glanced at the card. Anybody can get a qualification. It doesn't mean you can teach my guys how to make a one-shot, one-kill hit under pressure at 1,000 yards. He pointed at her worn leather data book. What's in there? Old notes from a textbook. We use real-time data, Chief. We're a little beyond handwritten math. His finger jabbed toward the book, a clear sign of disrespect. And as he did, the sun caught the small, tarnished silver badge pinned above her uniform's pocket tape. It was a simple rectangular pin with a rifle superimposed on it. The Distinguished Marksman Badge, one of the oldest and most difficult to earn awards in the U.S. military. It was a small detail. Most people, even most sailors, wouldn't recognize its significance. To them it was just another piece of flair. But to a true student of the rifle it was a symbol of near perfection, earned through years of grueling competition against the best shooters in the armed forces. Miller, in his arrogance, didn't even see it. The book he was mocking felt heavy at her side. It wasn't just a collection of notes. It was a diary of solved problems. Each page was a puzzle of wind, light, and pressure she had deciphered, from the frigid mountains of Bridgeport to the humid ranges of Virginia. A memory flared, sharp and sudden. Not a textbook, Lieutenant. A final exam. The image cut through the present-day heat. She was prone, not on a comfortable mat, but on the gravel of a rooftop in a country whose name was classified. The wind was a living thing, whipping dust and debris through a shattered city. Next to her, a spotter with a quiet, tense voice whispered readings. Her target was a glint of light, a reflection off a scope over a mile away. Her own ballistic computer was glitching, the screen flickering uselessly. The wind was doing a dozen different things between her and the target. But she had her book. She flipped to a page filled with notes from a competition in the gusty plains of Wyoming. A similar problem, high-angle shifting crosswinds, a valley that acted as a funnel. Her pen had scrawled a formula, a simple correction based on observing the behavior of dust devils. It wasn't in any manual. It was a lesson she had learned herself. She did the math in her head, made the adjustment, and squeezed the trigger. The memory ended there, with the quiet hiss of the bullet leaving the barrel, and the echo of the shot rolling through the ruined streets. She blinked, the desert sun feeling harsh and bright. Miller was still talking, his voice a low, angry buzz. "So I am respectfully asking you, Chief, one last time, to return to the main base and let us get on with our work." Unseen by Miller and his team, up in the range control tower, a man lowered his binoculars. Master Chief Petty Officer Frank Davis had seen the whole exchange. He'd been in the Navy for 28 years and had a finely tuned instinct for when a situation was about to go from a simple pissing contest to a full-blown command-level incident. He knew Lieutenant Miller as a young, aggressive officer, good at his job but with an ego that sometimes outran his experience. And he knew Chief Johnson, not personally, but by reputation. A reputation that was whispered with a kind of awe among the serious shooting community. He'd seen her name on the instructor rotation and had been curious. Now he was witnessing a disaster in the making. He watched as Miller put his hand on his radio, as if preparing to call security to have her escorted off his range. That was the line. That was the point of no return. Davis grabbed his own phone, his thumb flying across the screen. He had one number on his favorites list for situations like this. It was the direct line to the office of Captain Thorne, the commanding officer of the entire Naval Special Warfare Training Command. He knew the captain was in a high-level briefing, but this couldn't wait. The phone was answered on the second ring by the captain's aide. "This is Master Chief Davis at Range 14, he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need to speak to the captain immediately. It's about the SEAL team training with Chief Johnson." There was a pause. "The captain is in a VTC, Master Chief. Can it wait?" "No, it cannot," Davis said, his voice as hard as iron. "Lieutenant Miller is about to commit a career-ending mistake, and I need the skipper to know what's happening right now." He heard the muffled sound of the aide excusing himself. Through the tower's glass he could see Miller taking a step toward Emily, his posture radiating aggression. Down on the line, Emily stood her ground, a small, unmovable island in a sea of arrogance. "Put him on speaker," Davis said to the aide. He knew what was about to happen would be a storm, and he wanted the captain to hear every drop of rain. Inside the sterile, air-conditioned command building miles away, Captain Thorne motioned for his video teleconference to be put on hold. A stern-faced man in his late 40s, his uniform was adorned with the ribbons of a career spent in the shadows. He looked at his aide, then at the speakerphone on his desk. "What is it, Master Chief?" Thorne's voice was calm, but it held an unmistakable authority that could stop a charging bull. "Sir," Davis's voice crackled through the speaker, "we have a situation at the sniper range. Lieutenant Miller's team is refusing instruction from their assigned expert, Chief Petty Officer Johnson." Thorne frowned. "Refusing instruction? On what grounds?" "On the grounds that she's not one of them, sir. He's challenging her qualifications and is about to have her removed from the range." Thorne leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The name Johnson rang a bell, but he couldn't immediately place it. "Aide, pull up the file for a CPO Emily Johnson, small arms instructor." The young officer at the computer typed furiously. A few seconds later, a service record appeared on the large monitor on the wall, and Captain Thorne went silent. The aide, a young woman who was a commander, stared at the screen, her eyes wide. "Sir, is this correct?" On the screen was not the record of a typical instructor. It was a cascade of achievements that seemed almost impossible for one person to have accomplished. Distinguished marksman badges for both rifle and pistol. The President's 100 tab, an honor reserved for the top 100 military and civilian shooters in the nation. First place finishes at the All-Navy Fleet Forces Rifle and Pistol Championships for 6 consecutive years. A gold medal from the CISM Military World Games, the Armed Forces Olympics, in the 300-meter rifle event where she had outshot Special Forces operators from 24 countries. But it was the billets and deployments that made Captain Thorne pick up his phone and start walking toward the door. She had served as the lead instructor at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico as part of a rare inter-service exchange program. She had deployed twice, not with a standard unit but as a specialized technical advisor attached to a task force whose name was still classified. Her file was filled with letters of commendation from Marine colonels and Army generals, all praising her preternatural ability to read the gun and her almost mystical understanding of ballistics. She hadn't just studied the doctrine, as the Master Chief had suspected. She had literally written 2 chapters of the Navy's current sniper training manual. "Master Chief," Thorne said, his voice dangerously quiet as he strode down the hallway, the commander right behind him. "Is Lieutenant Miller aware that he is speaking to the woman who holds the current long-distance rifle record for the entire Department of the Navy?" "I don't believe that has come up in conversation, sir," Davis replied dryly. "Keep the line open," Thorne ordered. "We're on our way. Do not let him remove her from that range." He turned to the commander walking beside him. "Get the command vehicle, and tell my driver to break the speed limit." Down on the range, Lieutenant Miller had reached his breaking point. Chief Johnson's calm defiance was a public challenge to his authority in front of his men. He saw no other way out. "That's it. I'm done with this," he snapped, his face flushed with anger. "You are interfering with a critical training evolution. I am ordering you to leave this range immediately. If you don't, I'll have the base military police escort you out and I'll personally file a report for insubordination and fraudulent wear of a rank you clearly don't respect." He stabbed a finger toward her chest, indicating her chief's anchors. The threat was absurd, an overreach born of pure frustration, and they both knew it, but the words were out, hanging in the hot, still air. Accusing a chief petty officer of fraudulent wear was a deep, profound insult, akin to spitting on the uniform itself. Emily's face, for the first time, lost its placid calm. A flicker of cold fire appeared in her eyes, but before she could speak, a new sound cut through the tension. It was the sound of tires screeching on asphalt as a black, government-plated SUV sped down the service road toward them, leaving a plume of dust in its wake. The vehicle didn't slow as it approached, only braking hard at the last second and swinging to a halt just yards from the firing line. The doors flew open. Out stepped Captain Thorne, his cover pulled low, his expression like a thundercloud. He was followed by the female commander and the hulking figure of Master Chief Davis, who had sprinted down from the tower to meet them. The entire range fell silent. The SEALs, including Miller, instinctively straightened up, their arrogance evaporating in the face of the command team's sudden dramatic arrival. Captain Thorne didn't look at Miller. He didn't look at any of the SEALs. His eyes were fixed on Emily. He strode directly toward her, his boots crunching on the gravel, the commander and Master Chief flanking him. When he was 3 feet away, he stopped. The air was thick with unspoken questions. The SEALs watched, bewildered, as their commanding officer, a man known for his icy demeanor, walked past them as if they were invisible to address the woman their team leader had just tried to throw off the range. Then, in a gesture that sent a shockwave through the small crowd, Captain Thorne, a decorated naval special warfare officer, snapped to attention and rendered a crisp, perfect salute to Chief Petty Officer Emily Johnson. "Chief Johnson," he said, his voice booming across the now silent range. "My apologies for my officer's conduct. I can assure you it will be addressed. We are honored to have you instructing here today." Lieutenant Miller's mouth fell open. His men stared, their faces a canvas of confusion and dawning horror. They had never seen a captain salute a chief first unless it was for a Medal of Honor recipient. It was a gesture of profound, almost unheard of respect. Thorne dropped his salute but kept his eyes on Emily. He then turned, slowly, to face Lieutenant Miller, whose face had gone pale. "Lieutenant," Thorne began, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Do you have any idea who you've been speaking to for the past 30 minutes? Miller, stammering, could only manage a weak. "Sir, she's the replacement instructor." "She's not the replacement instructor," Thorne cut him off. "She is the reason we have a replacement program. Let me enlighten you. You stand before Chief Petty Officer Emily Johnson. For the last 6 years, she has won the Fleet Forces competition. Not placed, won. She competed in the CISM games against the best snipers from every major military in the world and brought home the gold medal, an achievement no one from this command has ever managed." He took a step closer to Miller, whose eyes were wide with shock. "You mocked her data book. That book contains firing solutions for conditions you can't even dream of. She wrote the manual on high-angle shooting and cold-bore shots that you were issued in your own sniper course. The very doctrine you are failing to execute today came from her mind and her experience." The crowd of SEALs was stock still. The weight of their leader's mistake was settling on all of them. They had been laughing at a living legend. "You questioned her credentials," Thorne continued, his voice rising in controlled fury. "She was the lead marksmanship instructor for the Marine Corps Scout Snipers at Quantico. The Marines. They requested her by name because they believed she was the single finest rifle shot in the United States military. She has trained Green Berets, Army Rangers, and MARSOC operators. They listen when she speaks. But you, Lieutenant, with your few years of experience, you felt you knew better." Thorne paused, letting the words sink in. He then gestured to the rifle on the mat, the one the SEALs had been unable to get on target with. "Chief Johnson," he said, his voice returning to a respectful tone, "my men seem to be having trouble with the 1,000-yard target. They say the wind is too difficult. Would you mind showing them how it's done?" Emily gave a short, sharp nod. "Not at all, Captain." She walked past the stunned Lieutenant Miller and knelt beside the rifle. She didn't touch the fancy electronics. She ignored the ballistic computer. Instead, she took out her old, worn leather book and a simple pen. She laid on the mat, settling behind the rifle as if she were born there. She took a few deep, slow breaths, her eyes scanning the terrain, watching the way the heat shimmer danced, the way the distant flags whipped, the way the dust kicked up in the ravine. She was not just seeing the wind, she was reading its story. She made a few quiet clicks on the scope's elevation and windage knobs, adjustments that seemed too small, too subtle. The SEALs watched, transfixed. This was her world. They were just visitors. "Don't soften standards," she said, her voice quiet but carrying to everyone on the line, her eyes still pressed to the scope. "Apply them fairly, to everyone." She wasn't just talking about marksmanship, it was a lesson aimed squarely at Lieutenant Miller. A standard is a standard. It doesn't matter who is trying to meet it. Competence is the only thing that matters. Her quiet wisdom hung in the air, a rebuke more powerful than any shouting. Her finger curled around the trigger. The range was so quiet you could hear the fabric of her sleeve rustle as she settled in. She exhaled slowly, and at the bottom of her breath, there was a sharp crack that echoed off the hills. For a long second, nothing happened. Then, from 1,000 yards away, a clear, high-pitched ping traveled back to them on the wind. It was the unmistakable sound of a copper-jacketed bullet striking solid steel. A perfect center hit. The memory connected to her data book flared again, this time with context. The rooftop in that ruined city. The glint of light a mile away wasn't just a glint. It was the scope of an enemy sniper who had 3 members of a pinned-down Green Beret team in his sights. Her shot wasn't for a score, it was to save their lives. The quiet hiss of the bullet leaving the barrel was followed by an eternity of waiting, and then her spotter's voice hushed with awe. "Good hit. He's gone." She had closed her book, the problem solved, the lives saved. That was the origin of the scribbled notes Miller had mocked, a formula for life and death, proven under the ultimate pressure. A stunned silence hung over the range. Then one of the SEAL snipers, the bearded one who had chuckled earlier, keyed his radio. Spotter to shooter. Impact. Dead center. I repeat, dead center hit. Captain Thorne looked at Miller, whose face was a mixture of shame and utter disbelief. That, Lieutenant, is what a master of the craft looks like. That is the standard. I suggest you learn from it. The fallout was swift, but not in the way Miller expected. He wasn't fired or reassigned. Captain Thorne believed in lessons, not just punishments. The entire SEAL team was ordered into a 2-week intensive remedial marksmanship course, with Chief Johnson as the sole instructor. It was a humbling, grueling experience. She ran them through drills that tested the very foundation of their skills, breaking down bad habits they hadn't even known they possessed. She was tough, demanding, and utterly impartial. She never mentioned the incident on the range again. She simply taught, and they learned. They saw how she used her old book not as a replacement for technology, but as a backup and a way to understand the why behind the numbers the computer spat out. They saw her make shots in conditions they had previously called impossible, and she showed them how. Slowly, respect began to grow, replacing the arrogant certainty they had once held. About a month later, Emily was at the base gym, finishing a workout. As she was re-racking her weights, a figure approached her. It was Lieutenant Miller. He was in workout clothes, and he looked hesitant, his previous confidence gone. "Chief," he began, his voice quiet, I never properly apologized for my behavior on the range that day. There's no excuse for it. I was unprofessional, disrespectful, and I was wrong. I'm sorry." Emily looked at him, seeing not the arrogant officer from the range, but a young leader who had learned a hard lesson. "Apology accepted, Lieutenant. We all have bad days." He nodded, relieved. "It was more than a bad day. It was a blind spot. Thank you for the training. You made my whole team better. You made me better." He hesitated for a moment. "I was wondering, if you have a minute, could you show me how you factor spin drift into your calculations on those high-angle shots? The way you explained it in class, I'm still not quite getting it." Emily Johnson smiled, a genuine small smile. The seed of mentorship had been planted. "Of course," she said, grabbing a nearby whiteboard. "Let's start from the beginning. Stories like these remind us that heroes come in all forms. True strength isn't about arrogance or assumption, but about quiet competence and unwavering standards. If you were inspired by Chief Johnson's story, hit the like button, subscribe to She Chose Valor, and share this video to honor the unassuming heroes who serve among us.